Apple has a reputation, had a reputation for being great at execution.
Yes.
Has this finally dealt to the fact that that is no longer the case? That under Cook, it's too big, it can't execute, and a lot of razzmatazz, but then problems.
Well, the last keynote that just happened when they announced the watch and the new phones was supposed to be the keynote that where Apple proved that post Steve Jobs it could still release great products, it could still nail a really cool keynote, and it could still capture the imagination of its younger consumers. No, unfortunately not, because not only did it show its sort of metaphorical and physical spreading waistline by picking U2, a partnership that hasn't done great things for Apple in the long run because of the outrage that people have had. Having U2 downloaded directly to their devices, Apple's had to issue a tool to get rid of it. The watch hasn't set people's imagination alight. It's clearly not a transformative product in the way that the previous products were. And then, of course, we've got this problem with this phone, which is, you know, it's so gigantic, and yet it bends if it's in your pocket. I mean, it's like wearing a splint, you know, against your leg. It's so gigantic. And yeah, no, it's been a bit of a catastrophe for Apple because this was supposed to be. This was make or break, and this was supposed to be the moment at which we found out whether Apple could still
make or break. That's not a bit aggressive, isn't it? Apple, it's sold huge numbers of these phones. Yes, it's had a couple of glitches. Yes, the phone maybe in certain people's pockets is going to be bending. This isn't going to break the company, is it?
No, but what we mean by make or break is, can the company still set the agenda and create and release transformative products that everybody is talking about, or is it going to move into a sort of Microsoft period where the company might well make a ton of money, but it no longer captures the imagination? And I think what we've seen is that Apple is struggling now to capture the imagination.
Don't you have to take risks to capture the imagination?
Yes.
And sometimes risks don't pay off and you fix them when there are bugs and you move on?
Well, precisely the problem is that they haven't taken any risks. The phone is almost identical to the previous model, just a bit bigger and a bit thinner, so it bends because, of course, it's made of aluminium. What do you think it's going to do? You know, the U2 partnership was an incredibly safe choice. The watch, incredibly safe design. Precisely the problem is that they haven't taken risks, like they did with the iPod, like they did with the iPhone, like they did with the tablet. I mean, when they introduced the iPad, it was an extraordinary thing because there'd been tablets around for years and they'd never taken off. Everybody had written off that whole segment of the market, and Apple came in and made it a multi-million-dollar market that other manufacturers were then desperate to get back into. But no, precisely because they didn't take any risks, they're no longer exciting people in the way they used to.
Aren't we, if we look at the hardware, though, aren't we looking in the wrong place? The innovation is coming in the software. That is where the news story is taking off. The whole health kit life cycle is just in its infancy at the moment. And as you start to move forward with that, you're going to create innovation that you haven't created yet. You just created the box in which the developers can operate, and they're going to spew out all kinds of cool and weird and wonderful things to make use of these devices.
Well, I don't think Tim Cook would agree with that. I think he would certainly take the view that Steve Jobs took, which is that this is a harmonious union of hardware and software. And these boxes, as you say, that the hardware comes in are assuming new forms all around us. We're having connected devices in our homes, fire alarms and light switches that connect to the internet, all sorts of things all around us, powered by software. The problem is the health kit stuff that Apple's released. You know, I mean, other companies already are building this stuff, and it is not a particularly better implementation than anybody else has done. The iOS 8 itself, I mean, Apple's design philosophy is becoming infantilized. You can't have too much of a good thing. And obviously, Jonathan Ive, unfettered by Steve Jobs, is turning the company's design philosophy into this sort of, I don't know, if Windows Phone is what you give, you know, elderly people and children, Apple's becoming the thing that's sort of the drooling inbred neighbour that, you know, can't work a washing machine, uses these gigantic fonts and flat design and rainbow colours. I mean, it's so ugly and so awful. It's turning into the phone for, you know, for people who can't work phones.
And you expect that to continue, or do you expect that there will need to be a change at some point? Because, as you say, it's making lots of money. Share price is at record highs. From the ivory towers at Apple, life must look pretty good.
I'm not sure about that because if you look at the DNA of, let's say, Microsoft, that still makes a fortune,
a ton of money,
still makes a ton of money. Shareholders are very happy at Microsoft. A lot of the executives are very happy at Microsoft, but a lot of the executives at Microsoft only really care about money, whereas the executives at Apple care about very different things. Their priorities are elsewhere. They genuinely do want to live up to the rhetoric that they often they exhibit in their keynotes. They want to change the world. They want to create beautiful devices that transform how we interact with each other. You know, and they
so what's stopping them? What's making this not happen at the moment? Because if they've got those aspirations, your view would be that they're not delivering on them.
Well, I think men like Steve Jobs come along once in a lifetime. I think he was
So Apple is incapable of doing what it wants to do without a man like Steve Jobs?
I think that it is severely limited when it doesn't have that kind of ruthless, take-no-prisoners, visionary, iconic person driving a vision of how the company ought to look. Apple's now starting to wander into too many fields. It's doing acquisitions that it never did before, the Beats thing. You know, yeah. Apple's never really done that before. And the Beats deal was interesting because it was an admission of failure. Everything Apple's ever done for the cloud has been terrible. Mobile Me, the cloud services that Apple's made, they've always been a disaster. Apple just can't make cloud software, so instead it bought some in. That was a really humiliating admission of defeat on Apple's part, and it would never have happened under Steve Jobs.
OK. The shares worth what they're worth?
Well, I think Apple shares are always going to be worth money, but it's like the Microsoft problem. You know, people who love Apple, people who invest in Apple, people who work at Apple don't just care about returns. They genuinely think they're making the world a slightly better place through what they're creating. The problem is that advantage and the magic that we're used to seeing from Apple is starting to slip away.
Milo, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Milo Yiannopoulos, tech entrepreneur and author of the Sociopaths of Silicon Valley.